How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the channel. I got another full overview video for a client, and this time we have the 89 Sabers Kylo Ren lightsaber. So for the client, when you open your box, first thing you'll see on top is the printed out instructions. This is instructions on how to operate the lightsaber, but as you can see here at the beginning, I also have your entire font layout with everything in order. We're actually going to refer back to this later, but as you can see, there are several pages of instructions because this lightsaber can do all kinds of stuff. This is because inside it has a Profi board version 3 that's been configured with the latest operating system, which is right now OS 7. And as far as functionality goes, with the 2-switch setup, we're utilizing FET263's prop file. So let's dive into it now. We're going to look at everything that comes inside of the box. These are your unstable side blades printed in a TPU material, which makes them squishy and durable. And on the bottom we have PCBs from the custom Saber shop. Here we have the case of your Smuggler's Outpost Dark Side Elite speaker, and inside of it you'll find your spare blade retention screws in case you are to lose any of them. These are your 2 Allen wrenches for your blade retention screws, the smaller one being for your side blades and the bigger one being for your main blade. You also have some merch here from the Saber merchant, since your Saber uses his newer PCB connector set, which makes your chassis removable. Next, we're going to move on to the hilt. This is actually my first time installing an 89 Sabers Kylo Ren crossguard, so I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive into what this crossguard has to offer compared to other crossguards I've done in the past. This one is pretty unique and offers lots of opportunity for extra lights, so I'm going to expand and talk about that a bit more later, but if you like blinkies, this is the crossguard for you. Overall, the crossguard is very screen accurate and about the right size. First, we can look at the upper core. It was way too shiny, so I did put some black paint on it just to dirty it up a little bit since it's in the gash, and this is technically a damaged section of the lightsaber. And then the lower core, I added a little bit on there as well. A little later in the video, you'll be able to see that these 2 cores can actually be illuminated from the inside. On the bottom is a red anodized pommel. Like all Kylo Ren lightsabers, it's one of my favorite parts, and we have the usual gold belt clip, but I don't think it's functional on this saber like it is on some others. And finally, we have that beautiful iconic red wire heading up into the gash. Next, let's talk about the side emitters. Just like a lot of the high-end Kylo Ren lightsabers, the side emitters on this were actual steel, so they could be heat stained. So I used a blowtorch and I heat stained these, and then I painted them with my airbrush and then sealed in that paint with some Spray Max 2K. And I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of these side emitters. I feel like I did a really great job with them and they look really good. Next, we're gonna pull out the blade plugs and look down into the emitters so we can see your blade connectors. Take your time during this process. The side emitters have a really great, strong, and durable clear coat on them, but you don't want to take any chances and you don't want to scratch them up. One thing that, in my opinion, is a bit of a downside with the 89 Sabers crossguard is the size set screw they chose for the side emitters is super tiny. It's so tiny that it's really difficult to even hold on to the Allen wrench, and I'm really afraid that these set screws are going to strip when I tighten them to hold against either the blade plug or a side blade. So to the client, if these ever strip out on you, send the crossguard back to me and I will gladly size them up to a bigger size. So I had something unusual happen. During the heat staining process, one of the side emitters seems to have shrunk or changed shape. So you'll notice when you look at all 3 of your blade plugs, one of your blade plugs is all scratched up. That's because I had to sand it down so that it would fit inside of the side emitter. So you'll take one of the regular ones, and if you go to stick it in, you'll notice it'll be really hard and that you can't get it in. Do not force it in, because if it goes all the way in, then it'll be jammed in there and you won't be able to get out. If you're looking at the crossguard from the front where the gash is, it's the emitter on the right side. You'll be able to tell because the unsanded one will fit perfectly on the left side, but it won't go into the right side. So as a solution, like I said, I sanded down one of your blade plugs quite a bit, and that's the specific blade plug for the emitter on the right side. Inside each of your emitters, you have stock version 3 NPXL blade connectors. These are all illuminated with 16 LEDs, so they're very bright and beautiful, and they make your shine-through blade plugs look great. This saber has a 2-switch setup. Top one is power, bottom one is auxiliary. And for the red wire, it's pretty standard. I glued the top part of it into the upper core, and then I split it at the second clip because the lower handle unscrews and comes off, so the red wire has to split somewhere. And then for the bottom of it, I just glued it onto the bottom end of the hilt. So I'll turn it upside down here and get in close so you can see. It's just glued in right there. I chose to do this because the lower core is actually part of the chassis, which you'll see here in a bit. Otherwise, I usually make the bottom of the red wire go into that lower core. Next, we'll open up the Saber and look at the chassis on the inside by threading off the handle. Now, as you do this, be careful because the chassis is removable and its connection point is not as strong as I originally anticipated it would be due to the added weight of all of the chassis components like the speaker, the battery, the lower core, all the pixels, etc. The safest way to do this is to hold the hilt upside down and then pull the handle up and off slowly. Just to be safe, always be mindful of the chassis, supporting it with your other hand once the handle is removed. Since the connector for the chassis wasn't as sturdy as I originally anticipated, I spent some extra time adding in some magnets to help strengthen that hold. To connect the chassis, simply plug it in, and to unconnect it, simply unplug it. You may also notice this connector has a cool feature that doesn't allow you to connect it in the reverse position. An alternative method for removing the chassis in a safe manner would be to simply unplug the chassis as you pull off the handle and let it drop down inside the handle. Having a removable chassis makes it a lot easier to access the soundboards for updating sound fonts and configuration, and also to change out batteries. Okay, let's take a closer look at the chassis now. It's been designed by me, resin printed, and painted in a metallic silver color. It features a Profi board version 3, which you can see here. Make sure to always keep it pressed down inside the chassis. You may lift it up slightly if you need to access the SD card or the micro USB port. On your SD card, you will find a copy of your configuration file that you can use as a template for modifying your configuration and or adding sound fonts. Once you're done, carefully reinsert the SD card into the SD card slot and gently push the Profi board back down into its slot. Just under the Profi board, you'll notice a kill switch. This is for turning the lightsaber on and off once the battery has been inserted. Here is a quick look at some greebly work I did on this chassis as we make our way around to the battery. Since this saber has 3 blades and a lot of accent LEDs, we wanted to extend the runtime by going with a larger 21700 lithium-ion battery. At the top of the battery compartment is the positive tab, as you can tell by the red wires, and the spring side is always negative, which should always go with the label on the battery. Flat side of the battery is negative. Push it down against that spring and then insert the positive end of the battery for a nice snap into place. To remove, you're going to do the same thing. Push down against that spring as you use your fingernail to pull out the positive end of the battery. And now here's a look at the greebly work I did on the other side of the chassis. Towards the bottom of the chassis, to illuminate the lower core, you have a 9-pixel accent PCB from Kim's Cantina, and then just above that you have a 28mm Smuggler's Outpost dark side speaker. I've got to say, with the 89 Saber's crossguard, I really love the details that they put into the upper and lower cores. Now let's turn this thing on using the kill switch and take a look at some of this accent lighting. First thing you'll probably notice are the turbine effects on the accent pixel rings that are on the upper and lower sections of the chassis. These are 35 pixel strips, and then there you can see the lower core being illuminated by that 9-pixel PCB from Kim's Cantina. As just demonstrated, you can turn the chassis on and off using motion controls. Once the chassis is powered on and you plug it into the upper end of the hilt, you'll notice that the buttons and upper core illuminate. It's not easy to see, but I actually put a Kyber crystal inside of the upper core, which is illuminated by another 9-pixel PCB from Kim's Cantina. Be careful to hold the hilt upside down so that your chassis doesn't fall as you thread the handle back on. The handle actually secures the chassis in place, so you don't have to worry about it when the handle is on. So now that the Saber is powered and the handle is back on, we can really see their great features about the 89 Saber's crossguard. This Saber has so many blinkies on it. The buttons, the upper and lower cores, and even the handle itself has shine through areas for those round pixel strips on the chassis. Next, we can begin to put in the blades. Make sure you only ever push straight in against the spring-loaded pins on the blade connectors. Never do a twisting motion because you could possibly bend the pins over and that would damage them. It can be a bit awkward and cumbersome at first if you're not used to cross guards, so take your time when doing the blades. It's awkward at first, but you'll get used to it after a while. Use one hand to hold pressure against the spring-loaded pins and then use your other hand to use an Allen wrench to tighten down the set screw. Turn the Saber on to make sure that it's working before doing the other blade. Okay, next thing, for the client, cycle through all of your presets until you get to the last preset. You'll know you're there because the font sound will say, "My boy." It'll be Emperor Palpatine's voice. When you cycle to the next font, it will actually circle back around to the first one again. So I actually have all of these presets on here twice, and the second round, there are no blinkies on, except for the switches themselves. On this second round of presets, all LEDs will be off in the upper core, lower core, and in the handle section of the chassis. Unfortunately, the switch LEDs are not able to be turned off due to the way the PCB is that came with the Saber. Basically, this is because if the switches don't have current running through them, then they won't work. So the LEDs have to be on all the time for the switches to work because of the PCB that they are made on, and this is just the way it came with the 89 Saber's crossguard. And then vice versa, after you go to the last font again, which will say "My boy, Emperor Palpatine's voice," it'll circle back around to the first one again, and then all of your blinkies will come back on. Having presets with all of the accents off were done at their client's request to reduce battery consumption and maximize runtime during trooping. Another thing to talk about with the 89 Saber's crossguard that makes it different is that the main blade utilizes a 7/8 inch outer diameter main blade. Most crossguards use a 1 inch outer diameter. For the client, you also get a TPU printed base sleeve that has an unstable look to it to kind of help match your side blades, and it adds a little bit of flair there, as you can see. Another great feature to talk about that's unique to the Profi board lightsabers with crossguards is we have the ability to do staggered ignition when you're facing down and simultaneous blade ignition whenever you're facing up. If you look at your paperwork, you'll notice each of the fonts or each of the presets say what type of blade ignition each of the presets have. So please refer to that, and you'll notice some of them do quick staggered ignitions, some of them do longer staggered ignitions, and some of them are just all blades at once all the time. But again, refer to the paperwork.
I'll kill you. I'll let nothing stand in our way. My boy.
With your gesture controls, I gave you twist on and twist off, and I also gave you thrust on so that you can act like Kylo from The Force Awakens and thrust your saber on. Last thing to cover are the timers. If the Saber is setting still and it does not detect any motion, all of the LEDs will go off after 3 minutes. Then for your motion timer, it's set to 15 minutes. You'll notice that the lights are off. That means your LED switches won't work. So the only way to turn it back on is to long press your power button, and then you can use a gesture control like a twist on to turn the Saber back on. This returns the Saber to a normal operating mode. I'd say that just about covers it. Your paperwork and instructions will include a lot more information, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you for choosing me to install your lightsaber, and may the Force be with you.